What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? According to Dr. Seuss, everyone is just waiting. So, what are you waiting for? And since I've put you on the spot, maybe you don't have anything that comes to mind. So, let me see if Dr. Seuss can help us a little bit. Are you ready? Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting around for a yes or no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting. Waiting for the fish to bite, or waiting for wind to fly a kite, or waiting around for Friday night, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pair of pants, or a wig with curls, or another chance. Say it with me. Everyone is just waiting. What are you waiting for? Did Dr. Seuss help you think of what your answer might be? I want us to consider that question throughout today's service. What are you waiting for? If everyone is just waiting, that means each of us are waiting for something. We're waiting for something as together we are on our way to Bethlehem, the theme for this Advent season. Now, if you were here last Sunday, you realize that we're going to be looking at the different geographical locations that are important to the Christmas narrative. And so last week we took a peek at the city of Rome, the seat of the Roman Empire, and how the air that the Holy Family would breathe was all out of Rome, the decrees and edicts coming from Caesar, and what an impact it would have not only on major life things like having to walk 100 miles to Bethlehem, but also daily interactions, paying taxes, dealing with the Roman soldiers. Rome. Last week. Today, we move along to the city of Jerusalem, the city of peace, right? Okay, maybe not. But Jerusalem is a city, of course, still very active today. Jerusalem was where the temple, the very center of Jewish life, was at the time. Jerusalem was an important place then. It's an important place now. Jerusalem was where they were waiting for Messiah. And in the first century, they were waiting for a Messiah who would come, and most of them were thinking that this Messiah would be a strong military conqueror who would abolish the Roman Empire from their beloved homeland. Remember, it's an occupied state at that time. They were subjects of the empire. And so they were hoping for this Messiah who would come and grant them their freedom once again. So as a city, as a collective, sort of a macro hope, they were waiting for Messiah. And then, just like today, each individual within the city had their own sort of tender and personal hopes and dreams. They were waiting on things that maybe lovers would talk about, things they were waiting for, or a doctor would, things that we wait for when a doctor will say, well, we'll know more when the test results come in. You can think about a child waiting for the excitement of Christmas morning, or a middle-aged adult waiting for self-actualization to live into the person that they feel God is calling them to be. Say it with me. Everyone is just waiting. So today we meet these two individuals, Zechariah and Elizabeth, from the Gospel of Luke. They live in the hill country. It's just outside Jerusalem. And so Zechariah is part of the priestly order, and every now and then his group is called up to go serve in the temple, and that's what's happening in the story we read today, that they cast lots, and it was Zechariah's time to go light incense in the temple as his priestly duty. We learn that they are righteous. The scriptures tell us that they kept all of God's commandments. They were good folks. And we learn that Elizabeth was barren. She couldn't have children. Now, that's its own issue today, and hurtful issue for so many who are barren. But in that day, it also had a layer of shame, because it was believed that if a woman couldn't give birth to children, that it was because of her sin. It was because she had done something not quite right. And so barrenness was a sign of God's disfavor. It was a curse. It was a punishment. So not only did they live with the grief of not being able to have children, they also lived with the shame and the humiliation that the culture had placed on them, because the cultural narrative was stronger than the theological truth. And so as they're waiting, Zechariah is in the temple. He's lighting his incense. He's doing his priestly duty. And outside there are the people standing and waiting for Zechariah to arrive from inside the temple to offer a blessing to the people. But think about the state that Elizabeth and Zechariah are in this sort of waiting phase, this grieving phase. They're kind of getting up there, and they're not sure that it's going to happen for them, that they'll ever be able to have children. And think of how they're feeling in this moment as they're waiting, as Zechariah is just doing his normal priestly duty. But I want you to think about this. Their waiting wasn't passive. And in the scriptures, the waiting is rarely passive. Zechariah and Elizabeth, they didn't stop living their righteous lives. They didn't stop serving in the temple. They didn't grow bitter or cynical. They kept showing up. They kept being faithful. They kept their religious commitments even when God seemed silent. And that's the kind of waiting that the Advent season asks of us. And if that's true, then what does an active kind of waiting look like for us? Well, it looks like just showing up for our normal daily responsibilities, to continue showing up when the answer is not yet, to keep showing up when the silence seems to stretch so long, to keep showing up when we wonder if God is even really listening, to do the next right thing, to go to work even though that promotion seems out of reach, to continue working on the relationship even though reconciliation seems impossible, to continue going to physical therapy even though it's a long, hard slog to healing, to keep putting out the application, to revising the manuscript, or going to that support group, or taking the medication, or having the hard conversation, or holding the boundary that you've set, or doing the spiritual practice that just seems dry. We just keep showing up as our form of active waiting. That's how we be faithful as we are waiting. So we keep volunteering at the food bank, or keep calling our aging parent every Tuesday, or putting one foot in front of the other on that path we walk every day to get our 10,000 steps. Keep making the coffee or packing the lunch or showing up for the meeting. Keep honoring the Sabbath like you're doing today. Keep speaking the truth. Keep extending kindness. You see, there are so many ways that we can continue our waiting and be active in that. Keep living the life that God has placed before us. Active waiting means that we remain present to our ordinary life instead of putting everything on hold until that big thing finally happens. That's active waiting. And so the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth, it teaches us that God often breaks into our stories, not in the dramatic moments that we've orchestrated for divine intervention, but during the mundane performance, the faithful duties of our everyday responsibilities. Zechariah was just doing his duty. He just showed up for his shift, and you know the rest of the story. Everything changed for him in that moment. Zechariah met the angel Gabriel, and Gabriel was soon about to go visit the Virgin Mary. Zechariah got this message saying, "You will have a son, and his name will be John." And all he was doing was showing up for work. But something else happened to Zechariah. Zechariah had a little bit of doubt. And so when Zechariah said, really? Is that really going to happen? Oh, that's my paraphrase, by the way. Really? I don't know. I don't know if that's really going to happen. What happened to Zechariah then? Gabriel said, I'll show you. Gabriel said, you won't be able to speak. You will be mute for the next 9 months until this thing that I've said is going to happen is going to happen. Again, my paraphrase. And so he had this most amazing news, this most joyful news that he was desperate to share with his wife and with the crowds that had gathered out there waiting for a blessing, and he couldn't even speak. But what we found out is that the prayer that had been prayed for so long, perhaps with so many tears, the prayer had been heard. The long wait was over, and the impossible was becoming possible. God was breaking into their story with the extraordinary news that this son would be born, and it broke through in the middle of a completely ordinary day. Zechariah, unable to speak, unable to tell Elizabeth, unable to shout his joy, to share his most significant moment, he could only gesture as he remained silent. Can you imagine his frustration? How irritating that must have been. Can you imagine the isolation he must have felt? Imagine carrying extraordinary news like that and unable to form the words to speak it. And imagine the joy mixed with the doubt. Imagine him wanting so desperately to be a father, and then it's announced, and losing his voice for 9 months. So Zechariah was waiting, just like, say it with me, everyone is just waiting. Back to the city of Jerusalem, where this all takes place, the place of waiting. Jerusalem waiting for a Messiah, Zechariah and Elizabeth waiting for a child to hold in their arms. The people outside waiting for Zechariah to emerge from the temple and give them a blessing, and all of them, all of us, all of them were waiting in the dark, not knowing how close the dawn actually was. Because they couldn't see it yet. We can never see it yet, even though God was on the move. God is working behind the scenes. We can't see it. But the silence was about to break. The waiting was about to become worth it in ways that they couldn't have even imagined. Why? Because Messiah was coming, not with an army, but as a little baby. Not to conquer Rome, but to conquer death. And a son was promised to Zechariah and Elizabeth, and he would be a voice crying out, "Prepare the way of the Lord," he would eventually say. And so the waiting wasn't wasted. The silence wasn't absence. God was working in the hidden places, in the cracks behind the scenes. He was working in the hill country of Judea. God was working in the faithful routines of this very ordinary priest. God was working in the barren womb of a righteous woman. God was working in the mundane moments when people just showed up and did the next right thing. So what are you waiting for? If you're waiting today, maybe you're in your own hill country carrying the weight of unanswered hopes and prayers. And if in your normal routines, maybe it's 9 months or 9 years or 90 years into your unbearable waiting, I want to remind you of one of the names of God that we learned during the Christmas story, and the name is this: Emmanuel, which means what? God with us. And it's not God who shows up only when the waiting is over, not God who arrives only at the resolution, but God with us in the waiting itself. God with us in those months of silence. God with us in the daily discipline of just showing up. God with us in the tender ache of hope deferred. God with us when we can't find words And when we doubt the promise and we wonder if we've been completely forgotten, you have not been forgotten. So the story, this sweet, tender little story of Zechariah and Elizabeth teaches us this: that God is faithful even when we struggle to believe, and that God's timing is rarely our timing. Zechariah and Elizabeth, their wait was long, but it was not empty, and neither is yours. So, my friends, keep showing up. Keep being faithful. Keep doing the next right thing. Keep your heart open to the possibility that God might just very well break into your ordinary Tuesday with extraordinary news, because Emmanuel, God with us, is with you even in your waiting place. And friends, the dawn is closer than you think. Amen.